Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to go over all the things which went wrong for Rishi Sunak yesterday, because although the attack on trans people was what attracted the most attention, the government made three incredibly serious blunders from a political point of view. Essentially, if yesterday was a sign of things to come, the Tories are going to run a very nasty election campaign, as expected, but they're also going to make a right mess of it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So I discussed the situation with Sunak's anti-trans comment yesterday, but that was just one of several incomprehensible attempts by Sunak and the Tories to get the polls moving in their favour. The Tory plan, believe it or not, was to have the media talking about how a Labour policy to insulate homes would cost twice as much as Labour are claiming. You may have missed it, and that's for a couple of reasons. The first is that Sunak completely screwed up in PMQs, thus creating more sensational headlines. He basically dead-catted his own policy. The second is that it all unravelled really quickly. Jeremy Hunt had to admit that the figures weren't calculated by the Treasury as the Conservatives were claiming, but that he'd just made them up. Now, I came across this story before it all kicked off in the afternoon. I had no idea it was a serious attempt by the Tories to launch an attack line on Labour, because it was so farcical. They launched the attack line, and then within a few hours, the Chancellor himself was having to say, oh yeah, sorry, we actually just made those figures up. The aim was to try to claim that Labour were downplaying the costs of their policies, and then, of course, pivot back to the £28 billion green investment plan. However, although I'm sure the Tory client media will continue to do their best flogging this dead horse, it was a disaster. In reality, arguably the Tories dodged a bullet there in a weird sort of way, because let's say it had been an otherwise slow news day and the media were reporting these fake costs for the Labour policy, it would have backfired, because anyone who saw the coverage which did take place will have seen Hunt having to admit that there was no official basis for the inflated figures. So the Tories would have been exposed as lying about the costs of Labour policies, which Labour could then use whenever the Tories attacked any Labour spending plans. They could say, oh yeah, they're just lying again like they did before. Then, of course, Sunak let his mouth run away with him in PMQs. I said yesterday he would have to apologise. It would only get worse if he didn't. Well, at the time of recording this, not only is he still not apologised, but now he's given himself no room to do so. He's doubled down on it. Sounds mad, doesn't it? There were reports of lots of Tory MPs demanding Sunak apologise. Now, I don't know which ones, but I'd be willing to bet it was ones in constituencies which are looking a little tricky for the election. A sign that even if Sunak doesn't get it, there are Tory MPs who know this is going down like a lead balloon. And at this point, it's worth considering why most Conservative MPs wanted Sunak to replace Boris Johnson in the first place. Yes, Liz Truss won the contest, but remember that was party members. The MPs wanted Sunak. And why? Because they were tired of the constant scandals and gaffes that came with Boris Johnson. I wonder what they're thinking that now. If anything, like for quite a long time, I have said out of the trio of terrible prime ministers this parliament, Sunak was the least bad. I think I have to change my mind. He actually may be worse than Johnson or Truss. He could be the worst of the lot. I think of Johnson as basically a lazy alcoholic, and Truss is just bats. They were simply unfit for office. Nobody should have allowed them to hold high office. Clearly unsuitable. But Sunak's clean living and sober, and he also had a former career which, okay, may have been compatible with having no morals, but for which you certainly needed a functioning brain, unlike career politician or Tory client journalist. And don't get me wrong, I don't think of Sunak as fundamentally decent. It was obvious from his time as Chancellor. He has no interest in people or the country. Obvious he was selfish and greedy, absolutely. But I really didn't think he'd be quite this bad. I thought he would be a step up from his predecessors. I actually think now that he's worse than either of them. So why hasn't Sunak apologised? Well, according to Sam Coates of Sky, he was actually discussing doing so with his advisors. I'd suggested as soon as he got out of PMQs, his advisors would have got out the sock puppets and would have said to him, look, let's go over what went wrong and what we need to do to fix it. So apparently that discussion was taking place. Admittedly, Sam Coates didn't mention sock puppets, so that's just speculation. And Apparently then, so Kemi Bad-Knoch basically cock-blocked him. She came straight up when other Tory MPs, senior Tory MPs, were prevaricating. Like for example, Jeremy Hunt was asked about Sunak's comments. Now, Jeremy Hunt did not support the comments, but also he didn't attack Sunak. He can't attack Sunak because otherwise he'd have to resign from the government. So what he said was, oh, no, he didn't say that at all. He just basically denied what the journalists were suggesting Sunak had said. Oh, no, I think you misheard that. That was his line, because he didn't want to support the statement, but he also couldn't attack Sunak, right? That was the line to take, pretending that what happened didn't happen. Kemi Bad-Knoch, however, came straight out on Twitter defending Sunak's statement in the House. Completely defended it to the hilt, really explicitly. And according to Sam Coates, that stopped talk of an apology. Sunak obviously decided that if he apologised after that, he would make Bad-Knoch look foolish. Now, it says a great deal about how vulnerable Sunak feels in his leadership that he has to double down on a very bad situation that he was about to apologise for because he thinks it would somehow be worse to make an idiot colleague look like an idiot. But why did Sunak use the line at PMQs in the first place in the context of what was happening this week? Because he and his advisors didn't recognise the danger. They're useless. You know, they thought it was a good line. It had been considered, it had been discussed by senior Tories and their advisors. It wasn't a slip, it was a deliberate tactic. They just failed to understand that this week that tactic wasn't going to work. They think it's a winning wedge issue for them. Reopen the trans debate to divide the country and win back some of their missing support. Adam Bienkov of Byline Times reminded us that last year, Lee Anderson, in his role as deputy chair, said that the Conservatives would probably fight the next election on culture wars and the trans debate. What we saw yesterday was Rishi Sunak adopting a strategy, albeit unwittingly, recommended by Lee Anderson. What could possibly go wrong? Now, despite the blowback for the Tories, Labour should be wary, of course. Starmer was clearly angry after Sunak's statement and will have been speaking from the heart with his rebuttal. But Labour do need to sit down and discuss what is now sounding like a deliberate attempt by the Tories to reignite culture wars. But the Tories are miscalculating here, I think. You know, this is speculative thinking, but try and think about it from a strategic point of view. Look at the situation facing the Tories. So they've lost a lot of their 2019 voters to Reform UK, Labour and Undecided. Now, try and consider where each of these groups are likely to be on this specific issue. So think about the voters who flip from Tory to Labour. Are they likely to be attracted to vitriolic transphobia? Very unlikely. They may or may not care about trans issues. Most of them will probably not care at all, but they are unlikely to be the sorts of voters who approve of divisive culture wars. Those are not the sort of voters who are likely to flip from the Conservatives to Labour. So it would seem unlikely this tactic wins them back. Now, Reform UK different. It may well play well to the voters who flip to Reform UK, but will it win them back? I don't think so. Even hardened gammons do not see trans people as a threat to them in the same way they see foreigners as a threat. So it's unlikely to win them back without confidence that Sunak is also going to drain the country of foreigners as well. And at the moment, they don't believe he will, so they will stay with Reform UK. So that just leaves the undecided voters. Now, there are lots of reasons why the undecided voters, and remember, when I say undecided voters, I mean the ones who did vote Conservative before and now don't know. There's a lot of reasons why they're currently not saying they're going to vote Tory. They may vote Tory, they may not, they're not sure. It might be the Conservatives' failure with public services that's making them doubt. It might be their failure with the economy. It might be their failure to build more houses. It might be their failure with Brexit, whether they're for or against Brexit. I somehow don't think that many former Conservative voters are undecided because the party don't seem vindictive or cruel enough for them anymore. If anything, the Tories are nastier now than they were a few years ago. They're certainly nastier now, openly nastier, than they were when Theresa May coined the phrase the nasty party a decade ago. Basically, I don't see how trying to reignite the trans debate helps the Conservatives at all. It allows Labour to point out that they've so little to show after 14 years that they have to resort to attacking vulnerable people in the UK. And now Sunak's caught between a rock and a hard place. He's refused to apologise. He's committed to doubling down on this now. But those MPs who are calling for him to apologise aren't going to just shrug their shoulders and accept the votes that they now risk losing. Sunak has now offered to meet the parents of Brianna J. It's to be hoped that his advisers will at least know enough to tell him not to laugh in their faces. But the disasters didn't even end there. All culminated in Sunak publishing a video where he tried to use a flip chart to give the public a load of excuses about why he can't make their lives better. But in a communications gaffe to rival anything else yesterday, it resulted in him, for reasons best known to himself and his advisers, drawing a picture of the saddest house you've ever seen, which was instantly seized upon by Labour. You know, when you do a presentation to the nation and your opponents use an unmodified clip of it for their own promotional materials, you've messed up. What we saw yesterday was potentially a sign of things to come. The Tories failing to observe any boundaries of decency, engaging in a campaign of pure nastiness and dishonesty. No lie will go too far for them. No attack will be too hurtful for them. They're like a wounded animal backed into a corner. Nothing will stop them snarling and snapping. But yesterday's Tory performance, it wasn't just that it was nasty. It backfired. It wasn't competently managed. It made the Tories look dishonest, uncaring and clownish. The trifactor for a party on course to lose an election. And it may well be that the Tories don't actually narrow the polls during the election campaign at all, simply because they are lacking even the basics of political skill. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.